Today we're going to look at the pillars of game design. So I've put together a playlist for you on pillars of game design. GDC talks, some Timothy Kane, a couple of indie developers, and this also includes core game mechanic loops and some other core mechanics and principles of game design, but really establishing those pillars and your core mechanic, what your main gameplay is rests upon those pillars. And the best one I saw so far was the level design of God of War, which actually is more of a pillars of design and a practical implementation of it in the context of level design. So taking your pillars and how to actually um, place them in the level, how to design the levels, intertwine the levels. And so we'll go through that a little bit. Also at the top here, one of my favorite learning channels is the Ryan Lely site. He's got his pillars of game design, and I just use his little sample here. Subterfuge, Paranoia, Investigation is his Project Mimic. I can't remember if that's a game he's actually working on or if it's just like a placeholder. The triangles, the Venn diagram, overlapping, how those might work together. And then I just have a generic template here in Google Slides with the pillars, the ideas, and generally three is a good number. I say 3 to 5 here, but there's you could have two, you could have seven, but we're just going to stick to three, and you can change these up as needed. And these are the ideas upon which your game is built. And inside this, I would put the game name and then pillars of game design. So I'd say game X pillars of game design, and you can change the background fonts, of course, but you can see here behind it in the God of War pillars that, there's a little banners, a little iconography, a little color palette play. So it's up to you early on to establishing. We'll also do this for the pillars of visual design for your game. Okay, so I built this in PureRef, and I'll share this file with you as I go through this conversation. This one's listed as put the synopsis and summary of your game along with your pillar, and then underneath each of the pillars you can then define. There's a bullet points down as done down here, and the handout I gave you can also put it in a sentence or paragraphical format. And so, just like the core mechanic, trying to find the heart and essence of what the main mechanic is, the pillars give you a chance to really start designing beyond just the core mechanic of the game. And so for this one, like I said, the Ryan Laley site's really nice. It's a short one, so I watched that one first. And then this talk from GDC by Rob Davis on the level design of God of War based on really making major changes to the pillars of game design for the God of War series. I believe this was in 2018, 19. So they're going to switch over to combat, I think, story or narrative with the father and son, which is the narrative piece here, and exploration. So these are the three pillars upon which the game is built on. And then combat, you have new mythical creatures, new mythical weapons, a new mid-range and close combat system. They also have a great talk just strictly on the combat system itself, and high optical mocap fidelity, so getting some excellent mocap in there, and having an integrated companion. I think the Ico series is one of the first ones I remember where you have like this duality in the character and their companion that tags along. The father and son narrative, where you're really having teaching moments and where the son's helping, not hindering, make it believable, and have a symbiotic relationship between the two. Pretty complex to do the AI. Ratchet and Clank, Ico. There's some examples you could think of there. And exploration, they really do a great job explaining how this pillar. So define your three pillars. Come up with three. You can brainstorm early. You can change them. But when you're first establishing your gameplay, after you do the main objective and the core mechanic, is establishing your pillars really helps the overall kind of plan moving forward to get off the ground. So all games have pillars. They help you create focus. And in this one, you can see the God of War, the Greek, and there's different pillars for every game. If you don't want the exact same pillars from game to game, typically. Um, and when they created the new pillars, I think this is for the God of War franchise specifically. They were told that they wanted to have some changes to the gameplay, and then they made this vision book, and I thought this was really cool. I want to do this also for the visual pillars of pillars of the visual development or visual design of the game. And so I think they can be intertwined, they can be hand in hand, they could be different in the visuals, but I think the visuals to complement the gameplay. You can also do pillars of design for your audio. You could do pillars of design for many different areas within the game itself. So let's take a look at this overall presentation, and we'll go a little bit step by step, and then you can watch the video for yourself and establish your own pillars for your game. Now, if you're establishing your pillars, if it's like one example we're using in class is having a mini game theme with like a hub world or a kind of selection menu world with connected mini games, how you connect those, that might be a set of pillars by itself. What are the pillars for connectivity between the mini games and the main game? And then you can have the actual pillars per game. In this case, with they're making level design rules. So there's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of really good content here. One of the things they do is a vertical slice. They use the stonemason level as the vertical slice to kind of demonstrate all the main pillars of the game, as well as to integrate their overall metrics to um, kind of define or measure if these pillars are being met, if the players are actually using the pillars that have been established. And then I think down here in the level design rules, you have um, after defining the metrics, establishing the core pillars, having a metrics to get some feedback on that, making good levels that sell a theme that you're tagging for your game. So really defining the theme well as the objective, of course. And then looking at the pathing, which I've talked about in my level mapping videos and course. If you've watched those, you have your primary, secondary, tertiary path. So the critical path to the primary path, making sure that that unlocks for this game anyway. They're unlocking a new ability as you take that pathway, and then of course as you gain new abilities, that lets you deviate from the primary path, and you can make alternative pathways specific to an ability, and you can mark that on your level maps, and it's just makes building the level so much faster defining this. And then after the levels, they make sure there's a clear break to explore. So exploration being one of their pillars. They want to make sure that the intensity graph of going through and actually applying all the game mechanics and getting through the level, like you're rewarded at the end, the time to like the downtime to actually kind of um, goof around or just explore the usage of your new abilities and how they tie together. And they have the rule for this particular game is the hubs are not an open world, so that the hub world actually has a kind of fluid flow going from one level to the next, and it's not necessarily something you just kind of open exploration. You're actually guided from level to level through the hub worlds as making a spoke. So we'll take a look at that. So you'll notice here the core game examples they're using. You have combat, narrative, and exploration. So this is a good way to, of course, they have a finished game, right? But you can use point of view drawings, you can use your level maps, you can use some diagrams. So what I would suggest here, whatever your core pillars are, a diagram of the actual game loop, that would be for that core, if you can express it that way. Storyboard, thumbnail, point of view, and graphs really help, as well as showing how that's distributed within the level itself. So how you might plot points. So this is, again, this is already in my level mapping videos. So on the main playlist I have here from the intro to level design and scripting with Unreal, beyond these first two videos, which is just kind of getting the engine going. You have your paper maps here, and here's the assignment there. Here's the first two. I'm using different media. But the Photoshop selection, go through the key and marking the maps properly. So you'll see here you have the primary player path, secondary, tertiary player maps, and like making really clear distinctions on where you want game mechanic, A, B, trap, 1, 2, 3, like what those mechanics are, like having clear delineations and marking those early on in your maps. That's covered in the video series. And so you can see here in the God of War, you have, the golden path, as they're calling it for this particular game, and alternate paths. So this is a very clear delineation. What is the primary path? What is the secondary paths or alternate paths? And what game mechanics those pathways explore. So in this particular case, exploration is what you're exploring for that primary, but you have the markings here too. So having a clear key and setting those up to fall in line with what pillar you're using is really a tool that is used throughout the industry, and it helps you keep your tasks, your game development tasks on point, and the development of your game will become much cleaner and clearer as you go into testing. So the other one they explore here is the narrative example. So they're trying to do cinematics without cuts, which is a great idea. So you can move the camera, but still let the player move freely and not feel like they're like have to sit and take a coffee break and just watch for a minute. They're slowing the scenario to allow for banter, so having slow kind of trudging along kind of moments where you actually have narrative be part of the game again without stopping the game, allowing it to be part of the gameplay without feeling like you're being taken out of the actual playing. And then using the environment for storytelling, that's pretty standard. I think every environment should be part of the storytelling. And I think they looked at the animations, and I'll just go through this quickly. So I want to go into every single part. You can watch the full presentation from GDC. The exploration examples, more wide linear spaces, so something where you can kind of zigzag back and forth some more. Adding bonus puzzles to I think you always want to reward the explorer in any game, even if exploration isn't a core pillar. And providing optional fights and areas that, hey, you can find something to connect back to the main hub quicker if you're exploring. I think that's always a good way to reward the explorer. And here we go again, though. Here's your pillars actually marking the map on there, right? So if we were to define that in our example here in level mapping, instead of trap 1, 2, 3, you could say pillar 1, 2, 3, and you have the shape and the color square to help designate those. And I think seeing this highlighted very clearly within the context of level design is a great way to establish the pillars for your game design. So when you mix them together, when you kind of when they overlap, when you're hustling between one and two, this really kind of helps with your intensity graphs and deciding, where the action is most intense and where maybe things are a little lighter in terms of the gameplay, overall gameplay experience. The metrics they use, I really love this information here. So for their overall level design, I think they're looking at level Legos. So really having clearly defined movement, I think this is awesome for any game that this goes back to Shigeru Miyamoto's responsiveness in game design, knowing what your jump heights and distances, when you can ledge climb, when you need to slide for a crouch, what those, you should have really clear affordances and visual indicators for when those moments are going to happen in the game. And this goes for the game design, but of course, when you implement it for level design, it's even more important. Here's the mantle example, reaching up and being able to touch without even doing a jump. They talk a bit about using the jumps at all. And the traversal test bed, having a little gymnasium level to test that out and how that translates over to the vertical slice here they use for their stonemason level, which I thought was pretty cool. Let's see if I can, whoops, use C. I'm in pure ref, by the way, so I can use C and I can cut that out. There we go. Um, I think going further with this, I think they have the intensity graphs here, which we'll talk about a little bit more, the slope versus the compat scope, and how they kind of add to how they ramp up. Of course, there should be a lot more peaks and valleys in there, but they're using like really straightforward metrics to kind of measure these and see where in the game you're going to highlight and actually add those metrics in. So as you white box, you want to pepper in your core pillars and have an intensity graph form. So that way you have more intense here, less intense there, having them overlap as we saw in the previous map sample. Whoops, where did I go? Where did my map sample go? Yeah, oh, it's little, that's right, over here. Right, so a combination of the mapping and the gymnasium and having, white box clear indicators that help you. The next rule they went through, which is up here again, and we're going to see the level design rules 1 through 6, that after you have some clear metrics for the game, which they're using literally measurement metrics for movement and traversal through the game. Then you talk about variety, like having your different ingredients. So it's again, you can mark on your map using color-coded icons very clearly. For instance, they're adding like some physics-based stuff. You can have like a rumble seismic abilities, and we talked a lot about this in class about using chaos and having where you know destructible pieces that maybe you can, and in this case, you can actually reassemble them to create ramps and things like that, which is pretty cool. But this versatility, the variety gives you some versatility for the gameplay to give it some other interesting elements in the game. You can also kind of unlock the critical paths levels. For their rule is to make sure that when you do a critical pathway through a game, you're really unlocking a new ability, which allows you to play back through that level with the new ability in a different way, which I think playback is really important in levels where you can backtrack through and have other new areas maybe to platform through. And again, testing this out clearly, the details using visual information, your visual affordances, don't forget that. So when you kind of see the obvious use and obvious indicators that you hopefully have already learned prior that are natural, instinctual and natural, but also the ones you want to teach through your gameplay system. The next one they use here for the rules is having clear exploration breaks. I think these are great graphs to use, so simple right here, which is having the shock arrow and you know the portions of the game flow which uses it, and then kind of the cooldown where you have to use a different you know portion of your skill set to get through the main structure of that level. And I think having some sort of flow through the game, flow charts, again, you don't need have any great artistic ability. You can make really simple flow charts to help represent these within the pillars of your game design. So this is a really great overwatching kind of blending them together, like which items are going to be strung together throughout the levels and how much exploration happens in between. So great peaks and valley of the actual gameplay. So the circular diagram representation flow, as well as a traversal through a few multiple levels and how the items and abilities and exploration of each of those levels kind of are strung together. Um, the next rule, I think, is a hub rule. It's kind of very specific, but I think making sure that their hub is something that you is a central core that you go through and then come back through to get to the next level. That's not like an open world area that allows to a lot of random connectivity that you really have to go back through that centralized location before you can reconnect to the other one. And they're using the old spoke with a central hub of the wheel that kind of goes out to those different levels. So that kind of, again, I think when you learn new abilities and backtrack or get better at it, it really allows for much more gameplay and a lot more fun. And that's where you get the payoff. And they talk about this also. You know, it becomes more of a reward and a honing of the skills and getting better at it, as opposed to keeping adding more and more game abilities or game mechanics or new items. Is just getting good with them. That should be something that you have. At the end of it, I think trying to decide where the pillars are broken, where there's conflicts that happen. I think they had some clutter issues, including your affordances, your clarity of what things you can jump up on or hide behind and things like that. And when you have a lot of fidelity in games these days, certainly you can kind of overdo having the um, a lot of clutter items, kind of visual clutter. So it's good to be aware of that in any game. So I think this is a good example to keep in mind as you're designing your games and getting your levels fleshed out. But this is a recap of the how God of War uses their pillars of game design to establish a new game for the new version of the game, different ways to represent it, different methods of incorporating it into the actual layout of the levels and actually layering and stringing the levels together. So we'll talk more about this when we start building out some white box test levels using some of the level maps along with the white box with some fun visual representations of those core mechanics. All right, we'll see you in the next video.